Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are doing great. So, today we are going to talk about one of the most important part in organizational development, which is plan change, the nature of plan change. So, our learning objectives for this chapter is we will describe and compare three major theories of plan change, and then we will introduce a general model of plan change that will be used to organize the material presented in the book, and then explain how plan change can be adapted to fit the different context, and finally critique the practice of plan change. So let's start with our first model, which is the three steps change model that developed by Carrot Lewin. So this model is very simple but very powerful, and you will see it used in many real life situations. So in the first step we have unfreezing, so means preparing people for change. So before any change happens, employees need to understand why the change is necessary. So if you don't prepare them, so they will resist. For example, if the university suddenly changed the system without any explanation, so of course students will complain. For any organizations, employees will complain. So this is the first step, which is unfreezing. Then we move to the second step, which is movement. This is where the actual change happens. The organization introduced the new system and the new process and the new behavior. For example, organizations start using a new technology or a new method. So this stage is usually the most challenges because people are adjusting and learning. And finally, we have refreezing. This means making the change permanent. So after implementing the change, the organizations need to ensuring that people do not go back to old habit or old system. So in a very simple way, you can remember this a model like this. First we prepare people, and then we implement the change, and finally we make it permanent. And we have another model. This is action research model. This model is more practical and scientific because it is based on the data and analysis and continuous improvement. So let's imagine a real situation. Suppose you are satisfied with job. So instead of guessing the problem, the organizations follow the structure process. So first we start with the problem identification. This means clearly when you define it, what is the issue. So then we comes to consultations with a behavioral science expert. So this it could be HR specialist or consultant or any experts who understand in human behavior in organizations and help to guide the process or the system professionally. And after that, we move to data gathering and diagnosis. So here we collect informations, maybe through interviews or surveys or observations. So this stage try you understand the root causes of the problem, not just the symptoms. And then next is a feedback to the key clients or group, meaning that we share the findings with the people involved, such as manager or students or groups, so they clearly understand what is happening. And we have something very important, which is the joint diagnosis of the problem. So the word of joint meaning both consultant and the organizational work together to make a decisions, to agree on what the real problem is. This is increasing the trust and reducing the resistance. And after that, we move to joint action planning. So again, both sides collaborate to develop a solution. So this is not imposed from the top. It is shared decisions making. And then comes action, where the plan change are implemented in reality. But the process doesn't stop here. We continue with the data gathering after actions. This means that we evaluate the result. Did the change work or not? So if not, so we again adjust and improve it. So this model is actually a cycle. We diagnose, act, and we evaluate, and then we improve continuously. So you can see the model like how you research and how you action and feedback and then improvement and the continuous cycle in that model. And the third model is a positive model. So, which is okay. This model is a bit different from the previous one because instead of focusing on problem, this model focuses on strength, what the organization is already doing well. So let's think about like in most case organization ask what is wrong and try to fix it, but in the positive model we ask a different questions. What is working well and how can we build on it? So we start with the initiating the inquiry. It means that we begin by identifying an area that we want to improve, but in a positive way. For example, instead of saying students are not engaged, we might ask, when are students most engaged in a positive way? And then we move to inquiring into best practice. So here we look for successful example inside the organization. Maybe some teachers or some employees are already using. So in a very effective method. So we study what they are doing right. And after that, we discover themes. Like we analyze the successful practice and finding the common way or patterns. For example, discovering the interactive teaching, interactive discussion to increasing the engagement. And next is envisioning a preferred future. Envision how you forecast, how you imagine, how the organization would look if these best practices were applied everywhere. So it's like creating a clear and inspiring picture of the future. And finally, we design and deliver ways to create that future. This means we develop and implement the strategies based on those strengths so the organization can achieve that ideal situations. Instead of fixing weaknesses, so this model builds on strength and success. So this is a positive model. And we have a continuous change model. This is another approach. Unlike the previous model, so this one does not see the change as something with a clear beginning and end, instead of changing as an ongoing or continuous process, something that organizations do all the time. So think about the companies today. They don't change once and stop. Of course, they keep adapting, they keep improving and responding to the environment. So that's why this model is called continuous change. So we start with discovery. Discovering means organization continuously look for new ideas or new opportunities or problems. For example, they observe the market trends and customer needs or new technology. And then we move to assessing. Here, the organization evaluates what it has discovered and tries to understand, is this important or is the worth changing or what impact will it have? And after that comes designing. So this is where solutions are created and the organization develops a new process and new strategies or innovations based on what it learned before. And finally, we have tailoring. This means adjusting and refining the change to fit the organization's specific context because not every solution works the same everywhere. So it must be adapted. So the key ideas here is that this process never stops. Once one cycle finishes, so the organization continues discovering and improving again. Started through observing and evaluating and creating and adjusting and then repeating. So this is the continuous change model. So let's go a bit deeper into why the continuous change model is so important today. Because modern organizations face constant and dynamic change. So they need an approach that can keep up. So first, this model addressed dynamic change requirements that help organizations respond quickly when conditions shift, like new technology, like customer preferences or regulations. And the second, coordinates and prioritize multiple change simultaneously. So in a real life organization needs to implement several change at once. So this model helps them to manage everything without any problem. Third, the model allows for customized and more change initiatives. And finally, it builds a complex and continuous change capability into the organization. This means that the organization becomes more capable over time, and employees learn to adapt, and the process improve continuously. Of course, the organizations becomes resilience. So the continuous change model doesn't just make one change. It prepares the organization to change all the time effectively. So that's why continuous change model is so important. So let's comparisons of plan change models that we covered before. Let's start with the similarity. First, in all model change is perceived by some form of diagnosis or preparations. You can't just make change randomly. You all know that because every organization needs to understand the situation first. And all models apply behavioral science knowledge. They consider how people think and how they feel and what is their behavior. So the changes are more likely to succeed. And they all stress the involvement of organization members, whether the Lewin's model, if you remember, and the action research and the positive model, employees are engaged in the process rather than the being a passive. And the last similarity, they recognize the role of a consultant or a facilitators. An expert helps to guide to guide the process and provide the knowledge and support the organization through the change. So now let's look at the differences. First, the model differ in a general versus a specific activities. So in a Lewin's model is a simple and general, while action research and continuous change uh, have very specific steps and cycles. And the second one, there is a centrality of the consultant role. If you look at the action research, the consultant works closely with the organization through the process, but in a Lewin's model, the consultant's role is the less central. And the last one, some model focus more on the problem solving, like action research, while the others, like a positive model, use a social constructive, and meaning that they build change by focusing on the strengths and sharing vision rather than the fixing the problems. So overall, all models aim to help organization change successfully, but they differ in their approach or structures or emphasis. And so these are a model, but finally, let's look at the general model of plan change, which give us a big picture view of how change happens in any organization. So this model is useful because organizations all the steps we have discussed in the other models into a clear process. It starts with the entering and contracting. Here, the change agent or consultant meets with the organization to understand their needs, to building a trust and agree on the goal and scope of the change. So think of it as setting the foundation and making sure everyone is on the same page. And next one, diagnosing. This step is about identifying the key issue or area that need change. The organization and consultant gather data and analyzing the problem and understanding the root causes. Without a proper diagnosis, or any change is likely to fail. After that, we go to planning and implementing change. Based on diagnosis, the organization and consultant developing a strategy and develop a design intervention and put them into action. This could be include a new process or a new training or a new system and tools, whatever is needed to achieve the objectives. Finally, we have evaluating and reinforcing change. After the change are implemented, so the organization checks the result. Did it work? Are people adopting the new behavior? So this step also ensuring that the change are reinforced and sustained over time. They don't fade away. So overall, this model reminds us that successful change require a careful entry and understanding the problem, acting through it, and then making the change. So this is the general model of the plan change. And we have four major type of interventions. Before we explain the type of interventions, any question, guys? Good. So we understand how plan change work. So let's talk about the four major type of interventions that organization use to make change happen. So interventions are simply the strategies or the actions that apply to improve the organization. And each of these intervention type will be covered in more details in the upcoming chapters. And also we have additional material that I will upload it and share with you. So these slides include more details about every type of interventions and help you to understand the topic better. So let's start with the first type of intervention, which is human process interventions. So this type of interventions focus on people and their interactions and communications, leadership, decision making. They can happen at the individual level or a group level or a whole organization. And the second one is intervention that modify an organization structure and work design. This involves changing how work is organized and reporting relationships or the formal hierarchy. And the third one is human resource interventions. This type of interventions aim to improve employee performance satisfactions and wellness. For example, including the training program and performance management system that help employees stay healthy and motivated. And the last type is strategic interventions, and these are broader and focus on aligning the organization within external environment. They consider market condition or competitions and internal structure and process. So all these interventions help organization to improve, but they target different. Some of them they target people area or structure or performance or strategies. So now let's discuss the different type of plan change. So change in organizations are not all the same. They can be different and complex. First, we have the yes.
Sorry, just wanted to inform you that I have to leave.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. So the first one, we have the magnitude of change. Some change are incremental, meaning that small, and some are fundamental, meaning that the major and organization wide transformation, like introducing a completely new learning management system or changing the university or changing the policy of the organization. And the second one is the degree of the organization. Some organizations are over organized and some of them under organized. When you are talking about the over organized with a strict rules or having a formal hierarchies, in this case, even small change may require careful planning, but the under organized, more flexible are and also more informal, where change can happen faster but may need more coordinations to avoid the stress. And the last one is domestic versus international setting. Domestic change happen within one country, but international change involves the multiple country. So when you plan in change, so leader must consider how big the change and how structured the organization is, and also the culture and in environmental context, because for each type of the plan change have their own strategies. So the characteristics, if you are looking at the fundamental plan change, so let's focus on the characteristics of the fundamental plan. So fundamental change is driven by uncertainty environment, because organizations need to respond to the market, respond to the technology change, or shifted in students, for example, expectation to survive or succeed. And the second one is it involves most features and levels of the organization, meaning that it is complex and extensive, affecting department and process and people, also policy, all at once. And the third one, fundamental change is usually driven from the executive level, where strategy and core values are set. And finally, fundamental change may or may not be developmental. Sometimes it focuses on the growth and improvement, but other time it is about survival and correcting the major problems and restructuring. So overall, fundamental change is a big and strategic and require the careful planning and a leadership style. And we have a plan change and degree of the organization. This is the second type. So in over-organized organization, where procedures are highly defined and plan change often focus on the losing constraints. So this means giving employee more flexibility in how they work. It also increase the flow of the relevant information between the employee and manager. So everyone can respond better to change and make the decision more effectively. On the other hand, in under-organized organization, where the roles and process are less defined. So plan change focus on the clarifying leadership role and developing the structured communication. So it also specifies job and departmental responsibility. So everyone knows what they are accountable for, and the organization can operate more smoothly. So whether organization is over organized or under organized, so plan change adapt to structure. It's either losing control or add structure depending on what is needed. So this is about the degree of organization. So let's focus on the traditional phase of plan change in under organized organization. So these organizations lack structure, so they won't change process by focusing on creating order and clarity. So first, identification or the relevant people and groups. It means figuring out who is involved, who will be effective, and who needs to participate in the change process. And next, the conventions phase. Here, the relevant people or department get together to begin organizing work process. And then comes the organization phase. At this stage, systems and process are created to structure and interactions between people and department. For example, job responsibility may be clearly defined and reporting relationship established and communication channel set up. So this is the organizational phase. And finally, there is the evaluation phase. After implementing change, of course, organization assess outcomes and consider adjustment. So this is to ensuring that the new structure work effectively and any gaps or any problem are corrected. So in under organized organization, plan change is about the building structure and how you clarifying the role and then improving the coordination. So finally, let's discuss the critique of plan change or critique. It means assessing and evaluating. While plan change is very useful, it is not perfect. So it is important to understand its limitation. So regarding the conceptualizations of plan change, many models assume that change happens in a linear or predictable way. But in reality, change is not linear. It can move forward and backward, and unexpected events can occur. Also, models often assume that change is completely rational and planned. But change is not always rational. People react emotionally or interpret situations differently, so which can affect the outcomes. And another issue is that the relationship between change and performance is unclear. Implementing change doesn't always guarantee or a better result or solution. Sometimes the organization change, but the performance doesn't improve as the organization expected. And the second one, regarding the practice of plan change, consultant or change agent may have limited skills or focus too much on a specific area, which can reduce the effectiveness of change. Additionally, some organizations look for the quick and fix rather than the long-term development. So they try to solve the problem immediately without addressing a deeper structural or the cultural issue, which can cause problems later. So while plan change is a powerful tool, but it must be applied carefully because of human behavior and organizational having a different organizational culture and a long-term impact. So that brings us to the end of today's chapter on the nature of plan change. Do you have any question?